Hi everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Fazz.
And my name is Rich.
That was very lovely.
Thank you.
And last time that you heard from us, we were heading very speedily out the door to the Leeds International Beer Festival. Did you enjoy yourself?
You're making that sound like a trick question. Or something. Yeah, I did. Yeah,
it was good, wasn't it?
It was. It was very good. Like especially the setting.
Yeah,
like Kirkstall Abbey.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, great to see it like that and get a really nice pizza as well.
Yeah, I was going to say the food we talked about last time, didn't we? We said the food, like as in, and we were like, oh, the food's going to be the best thing that we're going to look forward to. And I did really enjoy having the food, but in the end, there was some amazing beers there.
Yeah, I think the only snag was a couple of places seemed to have last year's list printed in the
last
brochure.
Year's beer just stored.
There was one in particular that a load of us were trying to get, and the guy just had to constantly turn everybody away.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a shame because it did sound really nice. But
my favourite beer that I had was my first beer, which was Derek the Seagull. I think it was a raspberry sour, and it was delicious. It was by Beanie Brew, which is just in Leeds. I love when if you look up an address of a brewery and it's like a garage somewhere. You're like, this is
someone's house.
Yeah, it's going to be good beer. Really put the heart and soul into that, and probably some petrol. And we were recording that podcast because this podcast that we're about to record now was broken by me. But I'm kind of glad now because I feel like I've got more to say.
So this is the director's cut.
Well, maybe not more in quantity,
right?
Maybe more quality.
Director's cut.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, of what I'd like to say about the games that we're going to discuss. So. Shall I kick things off because I've got the most retro game.
I mean, mine's going to be shoddy as hell.
Okay, wonderful. That's
Billy Boots.
Yeah, excellent. So we're talking about the third-person shooters tonight, and we have been using our Vitas and PSP to do so, to game them, if you will. So I was playing Syphon Filter, the PlayStation 1 Syphon Filter. Game from 1999. This isn't the first time that I've recorded myself speaking about reviewing Syphon Filter. There is a tape somewhere in my long lost past of me and my friend Dwayne and my friend Bairdy talking. I think we were reviewing the demo of Syphon Filter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not even the full game.
It wasn't the full game, but that's how much time I think we spent. Because I think on the PlayStation Magazine demo, you could do most of the first level. Which is quite a sizable chunk of gameplay to put into a demo. We were probably maybe a little bit young to even buy Syphon Filter. It wouldn't have been a 15, I don't think. But I mean, Gabe Logan, the way he runs is very seductive. His hips have got a lot of movement in them.
Hips don't lie.
Yeah. So
Gabe got game.
Yeah. So maybe it could have been impressionable for a 11-year-old boys watching him.
Understandably so.
There is a tape out there somewhere. I mean, a physical tape that's probably lying in the trash, and it was one of those things where you record it so. I can't remember how you used to be able to do it with a tape cassette, but I think you had one. When you used to be able to record music off the radio and put it onto the tape cassette and things. And I can't remember what we did with it really exactly, but we definitely were recording a review of the game whilst I think we were maybe even listening to probably Steps or even Ricky Martin maybe.
Nice. Both fine choices.
So maybe that was Living La Vida Loca podcast and this is Living La Vita Loca. So 1999, a young impressionable 11-year-old who had just tried and failed to get past the dock part of Metal Gear Solid.
Oh, we were all been there.
And then I came across this. So it's a third-person. It's described mostly as a third-person stealth action shooter, which it feels like having your cake and eating it, being stealth and action at the same time, really. But I understand why they say why it's described as that, because there are levels and missions where you are pretty much in full stealth mode. Gabe wandering around in a tuxedo again with his weird gait, if you will.
Seductive wiggle.
Seductive weird gait in his tuxedo. But yeah, I guess that the reason I want to dwell on that is because I don't think there's much else that sits. If you were to Google games like Syphon Filter, not much returns as a search, and I think that's it. Kind of feels that, and I'm going to come back to this point probably later on in the pod, really, but it does feel a bit, maybe not one of one, but certainly of that type of game. Most people kind of go, "Oh, it's a bit like Metal Gear Solid," and you go, "Is it?" I mean, I personally go, "Is it?" Although I did read recently that the producers of the game were comparing themselves to Metal Gear Solid. I think that they were sort of saying that, that I think, was it as recently as July? It was it wasn't, it was such a nothingy news article when it was like, oh, we would try and do our own game and we were completely unaware of what Konami were doing. They were just doing what we were doing, but better. And I was like, all right, okay, that's interesting that you think that, because I've got a little bit of a different take on that, I think. So we'll see how we get on. Yeah. If you haven't played Syphon Filter before, this is where you say if you have or haven't.
Oh, right, sorry. Have I?
You weren't a PlayStation 1 kind of guy, were you?
No, not really. We did have Metal Gear Solid, though. You know what? If I have played it, it probably would have been the demo.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever actually owned a copy of a Syphon Filter. But like when you say about stealth action, in my head it's like you would normally get stealth and action, or stealth or action.
Yeah.
And certainly as I sit here, the other games, from what I remember playing of the demo, the other games that are coming to mind, like anywhere from Splinter Cell to Mission Impossible, you know, things like that, would also not quite fall into that same bracket. They're more stealth to my mind. We'll go with no, because I have dabbled with it so briefly.
But I think that will be a lot of people's experience of Syphon Filter, if I'm going to be honest. I think most people remember one or two things, really, and that probably just tasering enemies. That is probably the most overriding memory that I think most people have of Syphon Filter, is just having that weapon at the start of the game, it being, your primary weapon, if you will, like apart from all the guns that fire the bullets, and just frying people to death for many, many minutes. It doesn't surprise me. I think a lot of people kind of think that's the main core memory that you access when you come to say, what does Syphon Filter look like, rather than Gabe's butt, which is what mine is. So just give you a little lowdown on the story then. So Gabe Logan and Lian Xing, they are a partnership, and in the first game you don't get to play as Lian. She is sort of, I guess, away, if you will.
Got her out of office.
But yeah. She's really a sort of important main part of the storyline in the game, and that becomes clearer as you play Syphon Filter 2, 3, onwards from that, and actually becomes a playable character. And that's quite, I'd say, progressive at the time, really, sort of having, it sort of pre-Joanna Dark,
decent female lead.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, in a spy thriller, almost, if you will. It's really well voice acted, and it's a very mature story. It's told mostly through cutscenes and dispatches at the start of missions, and similar sort of thing that you probably get in most of these games, where you get a radio transmission. It says, "Oh, you've got to go here and do this," but really dense as a story, and it is probably more Mission Impossible than anything else.
Right,
but you even get, so Gabe is part of this sort of shadowy agency, and they're trying to catch up with this terrorist group called Black Baton, which is quite scary in itself.
Black Baton?
The Black Baton.
Black Baton? What the hell kind of a name is
baton?
That? Yeah, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. So anyway,
I don't know, Black Talon or something like that.
Yeah, I know. So the Black Baton.
It's just a stick.
Jared Wayne, the Black Brigade, Black Parade. These terrorists, they have stolen the Syphon Filter virus, and What's interesting about Syphon Filter virus is that it is not just a virus that you release and then it kills everybody. It targets certain people, and it's really funny that I was like, "Oh, this is Metal Gear Solid 5's storyline." So I was like, "Oh, they were doing Metal Gear Solid 5 before Metal Gear Solid 5 was doing it." And actually, the gameplay is weirdly similar in terms of being that sort of that third person over the shoulder shooter. It's not an open world game per se, but the levels are quite, I guess, whilst having a linear through thread, they are quite expansive in so much they do feel quite wide and substantial,
right.
with lots of objectives. So, yeah, the story, whilst I said it was dense and complex, that is, I don't think I need to necessarily go into it much more than that. Like, I'd say it goes along at a pace, but sometimes it can get lost in its own bullshit as well. That is, in sometimes I'm listening and I'm thinking, I don't really care that much. I probably just need to read the dispatch at the next screen just to tell me what to do first in the next mission. But yeah, generally it was good espionage and intrigue. Syphon Filter.
Okay. Yep.
So in terms of gameplay, then, like I say, everyone remembers the taser. The enemy AI is quite good in Syphon Filter, I think. There's a danger bar that you have that if you were in danger, unsurprisingly, the danger bar fills up. But it's almost like, whilst it sounds a bit reductive, if you have lots of enemies around you but your danger bar is low, you're kind of in a good spot. Like, where you must be standing must be okay. Whereas if your danger bar is flashing really dark red and flashing, it's like you are about to die probably if you don't do something about it. So it's a really good indicator, as you'd expect it to be, in terms of being able to use the environment around you to make sure that you are fighting the right way and engaging the enemy in the right way. So actually, that was something that was, I don't think I remember seeing very much at the time in terms of having that, this is the right place to stand and this is the right place to shoot and the right place to, be.
Yeah, because Splinter Cell would have various little dials and gauges and stuff, wouldn't it, for like how light or dark a place is and like sound levels and stuff like that. But I don't know if they were doing it early doors or anything like that. So yeah, that sounds like a really early example.
And there's a really great variety of weapons in this as well. So apart from that taser, you do, where you think in the first mission, you think most games kind of will go, oh, here's your pistol and a taser. Well, actually, in the first mission, you can get a sniper rifle, you can get a shotgun, an M16 gun, and another type of pistol. And they're all selected by the select button.
Oh, right.
So
I thought you were going to say like dozen or something like that. Like you just turn, like they give you all the toys.
Who knew the select button would be used to actually select something?
That would make a lot of sense.
It's crazy. Like, as in, I don't know many other games where you cycle through using the select button.
No. Now you mention it, and it sounds so obvious. Yeah. And yet here we are.
Yeah, and here we are.
In fact, it was so that completely passed me by. Yeah. I know people can't see this, but I was just sat here staring at Fazz with the most blank expression on my face as he was waiting for me to say select just then.
Yeah, and in terms of gameplay in general, it just like the storyline, it moves along at a real lick. You get a real sense of urgency as you're moving through these levels. There's some timed levels and missions where it is really obviously imperative to your life and other people around you before these bombs go off that you move with pace. So you only really learn from failing a couple of times to be able to know, all right, okay, I need to go to this bomb first in this corner of this level, or I need to go to this part of the level. There's, I would say, a lot of, for the time, certainly, I don't think that I would have played on a PlayStation game. And again, this is where I'm kind of referencing Metal Gear Solid, really, where there was so much fluidity with the gameplay.
Okay.
And the controls felt, on one hand, you couldn't use the analog sticks on the PlayStation 1, whereas actually when I played this through in the Vita, you could, which is really handy. And I'll come back to that at the end. So it was really annoying that you could just use a D-pad. If this had been dual analog sticks, it would have been absolutely amazing, I think, in terms of movement. But apart from that part of it, control-wise, it's great. The aiming system, there's not sort of auto-aim system, there's a free aim system. Gabe does a really great combat role that can get you in and out of battle very quickly. It just feels like a very clever game, whilst you are combating a lot of very clever enemy AI at the same time as well. And I didn't really appreciate it, I don't think, at the time as much as I do now, and thinking, I don't think there was much going on in the gaming world that was doing so well as what Syphon Filter was doing in 1999.
It sounds like the kind of thing that might be like primed and ready for a bit of a reboot, remaster, revisit.
Would fucking love that
type thing, maybe. Yeah. Dust it off a bit.
I know that they've had a little bit of a revival because I think they're on PS Plus Premium, so you can access most. I think you can get them all actually. So, and we'll come on to the series as a whole a little bit later, I think. But in terms of it's quite a difficult game, I would say. But I don't think it gets to the point where you get super frustrated with it. I think that it's almost you just have to be at your best to beat it.
Right.
So again, in a similar vein of what you'd say for Metal Gear Solid as a reference point, where you just have to be very, very good at not being spotted by the guards and learning sort of, I guess, the stealth missions, for example. You just need to learn where the guards are going to go next before you make your move. And that means you have to fail a few times before that happens. So as long as you're accepting of that, then actually the difficulty level is pretty good. The headshot gets you out of a lot of things. And the good thing is when you're aiming in free mode, and you hover over someone's head, it'll say headshot. So you're like, oh great, hey, I'm gonna go.
Systems go.
Yeah. I'm gonna blow this dude's brains out. It's brilliant. And going back to the idea that there's a lot of objectives and a lot of things to do, which is great, provides that really good wide level variety. One of the things that really annoys me about the original Syphon Filter is that they kind of hide objectives sometimes, certainly in the earlier levels as well, like in dark areas of rooms or levels, and I don't really know why. I don't know how that's expanding the gamer's enjoyment of the game. So there's you, Gabe, for being a wonderful combat, agent, can't survive like a 3-foot fall down a fucking elevator shaft. He's crippled immediately. So if you go near an elevator that is sort of down on the lower level, if you will, and you need to operate it so it comes up to you, but then the switch is just literally hidden in the dark, and and you do get a torch that you can use, but at the same time, it's really annoying. It's just a kind of a frustrating little pernickety bit. And
is that them trying to show off a bit of tech?
Yeah, maybe.
We've managed to make a working torch, guys.
And I remember in the sort of the second level in the subway, and a train crashes at one point, and it kind of makes all of the infrastructure all gnarled up and things. And you have to climb up some broken beams that there's a fire underneath you, and you've got to be precisely underneath the right spot of the beam every single time. And when you're operating on a very small basis on your D-pad, trying to balance on that area and pull yourself up and not fall, it can just feel really fiddly.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, why are you putting a really quite difficult fiddly part in when I don't think you're necessarily thinking the game is going to enjoy that, really, the person who's playing it. So there are some things where it does get a little bit frustrating in the level design, but mostly it's quite clever. So this is what I kind of want to come to with the Metal Gear Solid sort of thing that I keep on referencing and keep on going, right, okay, well, why do you keep saying that then? And it was kind of in the back of my mind from this article then, from these guys, the producers of the game, Eidetic and Bend Studios, they turned into, to sort of say, well, Metal Gear Solid were doing stuff that was better than us. And I was like, well, what is it then that you think that they were doing that was so much better than what you were doing? Because gameplay, I think, is absolutely exceptional for the time. The voice acting, the music, a lot of the atmospheric sounds and the way that the game feels are brilliant as well. So I was a bit like, well, so what is it that you as the producer of the game of Syphon Filter, think that actually you weren't doing as good as Metal Gear Solid? Because for me, personally, playing both games and loving both those franchises, I think he was doing a pretty bang-up job at the exact same time. And I was just going to ask you, because obviously you haven't played, like you say, that much Syphon Filter, but certainly you played a lot of Metal Gear Solid. What from what I've described so far, do you think maybe might make Metal Gear Solid stand out a bit more than...
If I had to guess...
Which you do, because I'm asking you
I was going to say, and it is a guess. I think I would probably have to go with like the cinematic nature of Metal Gear Solid.
Written down in my notes.
Like,
what is missing? Cinematics? Question mark.
Yeah, like, and it's not necessarily as cut and dry as just cutscenes general, but like the way that a lot of the scenes that you were playing through in Metal Gear Solid, the way they're framed, and the kind of cinematography, if you like, of some of those scenes and sequences had a filmic sensibility to them that a lot of games didn't necessarily have, especially if the camera is going to be behind the character that you're controlling at all times, rather than doing that kind of Resident Evil fixed position type thing.
Yeah, it's
much harder to control what is or isn't revealed and the pace of it and things like that. So I think story and how it's told is one thing, but also I think in Metal Gear Solid, what elevates it is how it takes that and then applies it to when you're playing the game as well. And, say if you hunker up against a wall and the way the camera sort of shifts around and things like that, I think there's a lot of little touches like that just came together to make it feel like an interactive movie that a lot of games of the era didn't necessarily nail.
Yeah, and that's why we do a podcast together, and that's why I want to ask you that question, because I genuinely need to know what it is that certainly the developers of their own game were saying, well, actually, we weren't doing what Metal Gear Solid were doing. And I'm like, I really, really, really enjoy Syphon Filter. And I've really enjoyed this playthrough, especially on the Vita, because the controls on the Vita, having the analog sticks there and having it in your lap, perfect. Really, really lifted the game into, rather than me trying to play the PlayStation 1 port on the PlayStation 3, which is what I started off doing. And I thought, let me just try it on the Vita. With the remote play. Yeah. And it all of a sudden became a different experience of, wow, this has actually stepped up an entire mark in my review from having that ability to have those analog sticks, because the fluidity of the gameplay really matches having that ability, whereas you're kind of very stunted with your D-pad.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping, I haven't played them on PS Plus on the premiums, but I assume they will have done that and made it, so that it works actually with the analog sticks. I don't know. The PlayStation 3 certainly didn't, but it'd be interesting to know anybody out there that's played them recently, if that is the case. But yeah, the cinematic sort of thing was the only question I was like, and I think you put it really well there, where Snake's, having Snake flip against the wall and having the camera angle change.
Yeah.
That's super impressive from MGS.
And Metal Gear Solid, like any number of scenes, you can look at it and go, like, the one that comes to mind is like when you first get out of the area that you start and you go up and see the helicopter. What was it? The Hind D.
Colonel, what's a Russian gunship doing in
there you go.
Is it Southern Alaska? Or it might be Northern. I don't know anymore.
But at any rate, like, it's the way that whole cutscene plays out, and then you are controlling Snake, and you've still got that camera angle that's quite high up and quite far away. I'm sorry, I'm talking with my hands. Anybody?
It's great. I love it. Yeah.
But yeah, the angle's quite high up, so you can appreciate things like the footprints that you're leaving in the snow and stuff like that. But you can't, like, unless you switch the camera view to first person and scout out and use your binoculars and all that kind of stuff. You can't see too far ahead of what's going on, and it's that kind of thing that is a step removed from the kind of totally fixed camera angles that you'd have in like Resident Evil. In fact, Resident Evil's the other game that I can think of that falls into this sort of bracket where it feels like you've got like a director of photography, working on it, and you have like a cinematographer kind of approach to how these scenes are framed. And yeah, I think it's the only major difference that I can think of off the top of my head that you might have.
Yeah, I just think Bend Studios, and who were at the time Eidetic, just have so much to be proud of with this game. Like, as in, I really do. Like, and it's not. I thought it was maybe going to be rose tinted glasses when I went back to Syphon Filter. I really did think I was going to be like, oh, this is a game that I really enjoyed as a kid, and I played through 1, 2, and 3 on the PlayStation 1, completed them all, and they were a challenge for me at that age. But I remember thinking, I've come away thinking I really enjoyed that series.
Yeah.
But I thought that was just going to be sort of, maybe it isn't as good now. But it holds up really, really well.
Nice.
So much more than I thought it was going to. And I'm going to hold my next sentence and thought for later in the podcast because I want to discuss it a little bit. But at this juncture, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 as a game. because I just think that the only things that I had real problems with that keep it out of that top sort of echelon, if you will, is some of the objectives being fiddly and some of the gameplay being fiddly. I don't think was a design idea. I think it was maybe a bit of a flaw, really. And that control with the D-pad, it is annoying on its original iteration. But from a gameplay point of view, a story point of view, all the sights, sounds, and smells tick all the boxes for me. Great third-person shooter. And if you've never played Syphon Filter all the way through, and you've only ever just tased Dave at the start, and you think that's the best part of it, go away and really give it some time, because it is a brilliant game. So,
nice.
So you third-person shooters.
Yep.
The Vita.
Yeah.
Are they? Is it littered with them, or is it?
I wouldn't have said so.
No,
necessarily.
Or is it just litter? Full stop.
That feels like a leading question.
Not at all.
I wouldn't say there's loads of them. And in fact, part of the reason that I've ended up buying Unit 13, which, surprise, I'm going to be reviewing, it is because I had a bit of an itch that needed scratching when it came to third-person shooters, and it presented itself, and there weren't many other options from what I can remember, really.
Okay. So is it by the same guys who made SOCOM? That's correct,
yeah,
isn't it?
I believe so. Zipper Interactive.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think Unit 13 was the last game they made.
Really?
I think so.
Right, okay.
So, I mean, did you...
The SOCOM... Because the SOCOM games are really, like... I've been meaning to play them on the PSP, and there'll probably people listening to this who are screaming and saying, "Oh, you should play them," because I see they're really quite well regarded. I
think so. Like I
Fighting Bravo, I think it is, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I dabbled with them on the PS2, I think, once upon a time, and I remember them being very almost hardcore tactical.
Okay.
Which Unit 13 is not. So, I mean, did you want me to just wade in, or
please do. I want to come back to a little bit of Syphon Filter business. I've got unfinished Syphon Filter business.
Cool.
Which sounds like a weird toilet thing.
It does sound like a medical condition that you need to consult a professional about, yes.
I maybe will.
So Unit 13 is if SOCOM was sort of hardcore, sort of tactical, Unit 13 is almost more arcadey, without necessarily the kind of immediacy of controls and pace of play and stuff like that. So the idea is that you have these kind of self-contained missions to do. You have basically like a grid, and it's nothing fancy. It's not like a map that you're moving around or anything like that. It is literally a grid of rectangles that, the menus are touchscreen only. So you push the menu to get the mission you want. And you'll have different types. So they might be a little bit trickier than normal. They might be ones that you have to do it against a time limit, or stay completely stealthy and things like that.
Okay. Sounds like a good variety, though.
There is a bit of variety there, yeah. And it also does pretty well with the maps. So each of the mission areas, if you like, is a reasonably large map, right? But it's kind of split up into different coloured zones, like green, yellow, and all that kind of stuff. And you can move between them without any hassle. When you go into a mission, it tells you whether or not that mission is like a short duration, medium, or long.
This sounds a lot like the Crystal Maze, I won't lie. Are we in the Temple Zone? Are we
far off? There are similarities.
Feel like I've been walked around. Dun, 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 dun. For anybody that doesn't know what the Crystal Maze is, watch the Crystal Maze. Fucking amazing. But it definitely sounds like you're going to different zones.
Yeah. I mean,
industrial zone.
But that's exactly it. So, if the mission is short, you will only be in one of those coloured zones for your objectives. You will probably be just around the corner from where you need to be. You can go take care of it and be in and out in a few minutes. If it's medium, you have to go through a couple of different zones to complete a few different objectives. And the longer the mission, the more zones you go through and all that kind of stuff. So, potentially, you can be there for quite a while. And say, the trickier missions won't have checkpoints.
Right, okay.
So you have to do it all in one sitting and all in one go. Whereas if you do like a standard mission that's long, quote unquote, you'll get a checkpoint when you move between the zones.
Okay.
So if you do get taken out, you aren't losing much progress.
Were the trickier missions harder, do you think, on the Vita? Because you'd be like, oh, I'm in the middle of this tricky mission and I've got to get off the fucking bus. Because we're always on the bus when we've got the Vita in our hands. You know, I imagine just sort of like...
I think it would have been harder if it didn't tell you before you started.
Right, okay.
That it's a long mission or a medium mission or a short mission.
It's your own fault for pissing about, basically, is what
yeah,
I say.
Yeah, basically. And what's kind of cool about it is that when you complete a mission, it doesn't, like, the progress across this board isn't linear, necessarily. It'll unlock, say you finish the mission in the top left, you can unlock the mission to the right or below it, and that carries on across the whole board. So you can actually, pick and choose. So if you are only able to do short missions, there's a decent chance you'll have a few on the spin that you can do. And that came in doubly handy for me because there was one mission that just wouldn't load.
Really?
It would just be a forever loading screen.
Okay.
For whatever reason.
Maybe that was the mission.
Well,
maybe that was your mission.
If I had to be patient, then I failed that one. And when you select a mission, you go and you can choose your operative. They'll have different specialisms, like stealth or explosives, sniper rifles, whatever. They have different stats that you can improve as you go. And, they have tried to give you a bit of variety. You go in and scores are tracked for things like headshots or, kill streaks and stuff like that. So, again, there's a bit of incentive to get in and replay and try again, try different approaches, try different operatives. There was a couple of missions where I was really struggling and then just changed who I was playing as. And then it went swimmingly because, I was going too aggressively and taking a bit more of a stealthy approach worked really, really well.
Yeah.
Everybody gets a silenced pistol as well. No matter what, big, scary, main rifle they might have. So if you did want to try and be a little bit stealthy to give you a bit of an advantage before a firefight, you could try that approach, and it was kind of nice to have that flexibility.
Yeah.
Especially when I had a couple of the trickier bits that I was playing where it wasn't working until I slowed down and was a bit more careful. And as well, you sometimes have traps to take out and things like that. And so it makes sense to go slower sometimes. You get star ratings as well at the end of missions. And if you get, I think it's 3 or above, you can unlock a kind of randomizer for a mission. So it'll mix up the objectives and things like that.
All right.
So, there's between that and the fact that there was a co-op mode as well, once upon a time and all that kind of stuff. So it does a lot right on paper. You get in and to control it, it's actually quite solid. And I know I sound surprised, but it has touchscreen controls as well. So you'll be going around, and the best compliment I can give the controls is that they feel intuitive. They are relatively standard for a first-person shooter, third-person shooter rather. So aiming, reloading, all that kind of stuff is kind of where you would expect it to be on the buttons. And say you have to interact with a bomb or something like that, you get a nice big button in the middle of the touchscreen. You just hit that, or you also get one off to the side near your thumb, so you can hit that as well. So you have a couple of options there.
Yeah.
And it's integrated quite nicely. It's unusual, right? It's very unusual. It doesn't feel too crowbarred in. It almost feels natural, right? A natural extension. Like you were saying about Syphon Filter and some of the, we'll call it platforming, there's a cover system in this. So it is a bit of a sort of stop and pop kind of third-person thing. But it can be a little bit picky and fiddly when it comes to cover. And you might think you're in cover, it doesn't. Or worse, you have someone, like an enemy that you can see, that will start to flank you, and you try and hit them, and you can't because you can't aim parallel to the cover you're on and stuff like that. Or I think there is a blind fire mechanic where you don't have to aim, you can just fire your weapon over the cover or whatever, but it takes quite a while to start doing that. So if you're trying to do that to react to something quickly, it ain't going to work, So there's things like that where it just feels like it's bumping its head on some limitations. You know,
not quite Gears of War.
No, it's not. It's not quite as sort of snappy and responsive.
Yeah.
It's not quite where I would like it to be personally. And also, like, there's some really questionable stealth. Where, like, there are times when you are utterly convinced that you aren't going to get spotted, and yet someone like 4 rooms over will hear or see something, and then alert everybody else. And it doesn't ever really make it clear why or what happened, which, you know, if you're in a standard mission is a bit annoying. If you're in a mission where you have to stay completely undetected, it's infuriating, because you could be bumping your head against that for ages until you work out a route that's going to be better in the long run.
It's interesting to think that a lot of those stealth levels, if you will, with a fail sort of, what's the word I'm looking for?
A fail state?
Yeah, fail state. Thank you very much. I was like, a fail safe? No, that's the one. Fail state, yeah. Where you are spotted and done. They don't tend to exist as much anymore. And I feel like it's because they're just infuriating when it's just like, you get so far through something, and if the AI CPU isn't good enough and it's just a snag, really, basically, it's really, really fucking annoying.
Yeah, it is incredibly annoying, and I'm glad that a lot of games have moved away from it, because I do, as a player, I feel like I should have some degree of say, and I want to be able to react to stuff. And don't get me wrong, like, you do have a little bit of leeway if someone spots, say, you crouching behind a crate or whatever. But when the controls, they're not geared towards reacting to stuff, you are slow to turn around, the camera's very close in on you, you know, you can't react as snappily as something like Metal Gear Solid 5 is a good example, where it will let you, like, it'll give you a good window, it'll slow down time even to let you react to stuff. There's none of that in this. And if the enemy has spotted you from a long way away for reasons you don't fully understand, that chance to react feels like it's been taken away from you for, like, no real good reason. That's where it starts to get a bit annoying.
I mean, one thing I'm thankful for then, after you've described that, then, is in Syphon Filter, where this is where retro gaming comes again and scores a little point, is that the game isn't clever enough to hold you accountable to your stealth almost. That is, in, as long as you don't just do some fucking crazy ass combat roll in front of somebody with your tuxedo on, with Gabe with his sexy hips rolling in front of you, then your fail state's okay. It's just, you know, you have to wave a gun in someone's face. It's like, oh yeah, you're not stealthing anymore.
And I mean, like, if that was the case, I think I would get along better with it. I guess the point I'm kind of dancing around is the fact that the game feels like it wants you to play at a certain pace.
Okay.
It feels like the movement, the controls, and all that kind of stuff is geared towards you going at this kind of, like, a kind of efficient but methodical pace, right? You're not going to sprint through levels and all that kind of stuff, but you're also, if you're going at a snail's pace, it's kind of that it's too far the other way. There's a sweet spot that it wants you to find, and some of the stealth mechanics don't feel like they gel quite as well as they could with that pace. The other black mark against the game, really, is just how it's all, like, set in the world. Like, there's a plot of some description. I'm damned if I can tell you what it is. Like, you get a mission briefing, but it's only ever like, these terrorists are doing a bad terrorist thing. Stop them. Okay. And so exactly. Okay. Like, you.
I will.
You go and disarm.
I am Unit 13.
Yeah. You go and disarm a bomb. You go and shoot someone in the face. You know, and it's all like, okay, I clearly have a job to do. I am a cog in a machine. I will do that job. I mean, that.
Is it too close to reality for you?
Well, this is it, right? Like, sure, it might be true to life, but fucking hell, like,
don't make
who
me
are
feel like
these
that.
people? You know, like, the characterization, the narrative, the motivation behind anything, and I mean anything that's going on, is paper thin. And, like, granted, for a portable action game, I guess it doesn't need much. Like, and this is coming from somebody who likes arcade games, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I'm sitting here saying it's about as deep as a puddle, like fucking hell, it's gonna be like practically non-existent.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I wrote down here, like, you kind of get the impression that if they had reskinned it any which way, the enemies could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
They could be zombies, they could be robots. It doesn't matter. Like, none of it matters. Like, there's no reason why they need to be terrorists. And not only that, but like the terrorists are like not a million miles removed from the kind of like Team America, Durkistan like area of like characterization.
Durka, Muhammad Jihad.
Exactly, and it's just
oh no.
They are not quite that bad, right? But they are not a million miles off. And my issue is that was done as a joke, you know, like that was satire, and this isn't, and that feels like a problem to me, you know. And I was waiting for a kind of, wait, am I the bad guy kind of twist? You know, it's that kind of, it felt like it was setting me up for something like that. And if it's in that game, I've not found it, you know? So you can't play it for the story, I guess, is what I'm getting at. It gives you a mission, you go and do the mission, and that's kind of it. For me, that was kind of disappointing. Like, it does a lot right. It's a good, solid shooter. It's not going to win any awards, I don't think. It doesn't really do enough in my eye to make it stand out, really. But if you are in the market for a third-person shooter on the Vita, and you, say, played Syphon Filter to bits, I genuinely think you can get some enjoyment from it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be, troubling any sort of best of lists, really.
Okay.
But it is perfectly competent, perfectly solid, easy 6 out of 10. On a good day, if I was feeling charitable, I imagine if I'd sat down and played co-op with a few people or something like that, I imagine you could be looking at a 7. But I'm pretty sure you can't play co-op anymore without jumping through a bunch of, fan-made server type hoops or homebrews or whatever. So yeah, I think 6 as a single player experience, but I could see it going up to a 7.
I don't know why, but the word, that sort of sentence, fan-made server hoops, made me feel like some sort of like clowns holding some flaming hoops like made of like terrible materials.
I thought that was how fan-made servers work. Is it?
Just like,
is it not?
Knocked together with hammers. So, I mean, but that is though still a recommendation as a third-person shooter on the Vita, though.
It scratches an itch.
We have found that shooters generally on the PSP and the PS Vita have been hard to come by. Good ones that function well.
I think, if anything, the reason I give it 6 is that I can't help but feel a little bit frustrated that it kind of deserves better. Like when we're talking about trappings and stuff like that, it deserves better trappings. There is a good game here, don't get me wrong, but it just needed a little bit more window dressing to elevate it a little bit, and it just felt like it was falling down on that front. And then you add in the stealth when you are forced to be stealthy. That's where you start to get those problems.
Do you know what it needed? A Russian gunship. That's what it needed.
Indeed.
That's exactly what it needed. Oh, the bit with, and this is turning into Metal Gear Solid Pod, but like, but like where you hug the wall and the parachute from liquid from the hind D is there, and it's like, and it goes to a cutscene. It's like, it looks like Liquid survives. Like, oh, it's so clever.
All that.
Stop being so clever.
But that's the kind of thing you do not get in Unit 13.
The game we're talking about. I wanted to loop back round then to Syphon Filter on the PSP.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the back end of the Syphon Filter experience as a whole, as a franchise. So at this point, Eidetic Studios has become Bend Studios. It's 2006, and they are releasing a PSP exclusive, which is a sequel for Syphon Filter, effectively Syphon Filter 4, which is a PlayStation 2 game called the Amiga Strain. I've never played it, if I'm going to be honest. I looked it up just to sort of get a feel for what it was about, and it wasn't quite as well regarded as 1, 2, and 3 on the PlayStation 1. You don't play as Gabe or Lian, you play as a rookie in the agency that they are now leaders in, and it's whilst it's an open-ended sort of experience, I believe. I think
Right.
so. Not quite as a linear storyline towards the end, and I think that probably just didn't sit well with people. So, this game then becomes a bit of a reboot almost of a right. Okay, let's make Syphon Filter back to what it was, and we'll put it on the PSP and see how well it does.
Got you.
So, funnily enough, I guess then. It kind of retreads a lot of the same themes of what Syphon Filter 1 does, and maybe falls afoul a little bit of. So instead of Black Baton this time, and then maybe what you were just saying about Unit 13, it's Red Section. Is the red section the bad guys?
Red Section does sound like a more menacing name, though.
Yeah, it does a little bit.
Baton. Like, every baton's black. Find me one that's a different colour.
Yeah, it's got to be like, some sort of like pride baton. It's like, lovely, sort of like with lots of sparkles. I would love that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to hit me with a baton, make sure it's stylish.
Make it fun.
Yeah. So, and I'd guess that all of the villain links kind of end up petering out from the previous 3 games by this point. But it was always really good at having quite good bad guys, I'd say, Syphon Filter, where this one, it's even quite a bit tongue-in-cheek, where the very first boss you come across, Red Jack, I believe is called, that Gabe even sort of says in one of his dispatches, like, that reminds me of someone from the first game. That is in like the very first boss that you fight in the very first game. And I'm a bit like, it's okay to hark back to this is what Syphon Filter used to be good at. To kind of do that so on the nose and then make fun of it in your own way and stuff. I was a bit like, I don't really know who that's for. It's not for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like, you can just imagine the sort of the developers are sat there going, classic. And again, the plot is complex and thick, but probably the best part of the plot in this game is over its sort of 8-hour runtime, which is definitely the sweet spot for a PSP game. Is there's a lot more of Gabe's personal story in this, which harking back to Mission Impossible 3, which I think is probably controversially my favourite Mission Impossible film, and that's got a little bit more of Ethan Hunt's sort of family life in it, and this is a bit like Gabe's Mission Impossible 3, really. So you can see that they've thought, we're going to do the same plot again, but actually we probably should put a little bit of heft behind it and actually think about it, maybe more than Unit 13 developers did. And
put some motivation
so let's bring some of Gabe's previous life into it, etc, etc. So that's pretty good. I didn't get a chance to play any of the multiplayer, as you would expect, but I did read in some of the reviews from the time that the multiplayer part of this was actually a really good I guess a comparison would be that people were saying that it was as good as PC gaming multiplayer at the time on the PSP.
Wow.
Which, I mean, so I don't know what they mean by that, but it was quite a widely shared opinion that it was a really good multiplayer mode. That isn't going into my review, but I just thought it was interesting to say that they'd actually done a pretty good job of, in the PSP's infancy, doing a good job with multiplayer, which is great.
Nice.
Because I remember at the time I was playing like Medal of Honor Heroes, and I remember having really fun time with that as well as a multiplayer. And there are good multiplayer shooter experiences on the PSP from early on that you kind of forget about. It's nice to hear there was another one.
Yeah.
So the main thing that I want to talk about really here is, and probably what most people are waiting to hear about, is how well does the PSP control a third-person shooter using one analog stick or one nubbin, if you will. It does the same thing that every other shooter does. It uses the face buttons to control the camera, and then the analog stick is for moving your character, whether that is Lian or it is Gabe. It's not that much different from other ones, and when I've had complaints about that before, it has been that it's quite fiddly to do fluid gameplay, especially shooter gameplay, with those buttons. But I think that the game does a good job of almost negating that by making the directional pad a really useful tool. So the actual shooting gameplay itself it feels really light. That is, it doesn't
Right.
feel like it's got any heft to it at all whatsoever. It feels like I'm playing laser tag. Like I'm shooting at enemies. I don't know where my bullets are going. I don't know where their bullets are going. I'm losing health, but I don't know who to. Like, is in, you can just kind of hear Gabe going, "Oh," like, is in, but I don't really know who's shooting me. And you know how you just feel like there should be some sort of like, I guess, significance in vibration, or that is in terms of, or
like a direction
indicator.
indicator.
Direction
or something.
indicator, and I just don't think that's clear enough of where you're being attacked from.
Fair.
So the gameplay of the shooting part of it isn't great. When you are not in, I guess, full flight, running through a level, shooting people, and it's a bit more slow down, think about it, a bit more of a tactical sort of shooter, use all the tools to your that you've got to their best ability, then that's when it really starts to shine. So the directional pad houses lots of different types of gadgets that you've got. You've got your weapons on your up button. Your left button gives you 3 different types of goggles you can use. You've got your infrared goggles. You've got these weird, magical, special goggles that just basically tell you where the objective is. Which it's just like, oh, these are your, whatever the fuck they call that. Is in, like magic goggles that tell you what to do. It's like, great, thank you. And then there's also, you've got a special type of sniper, which has specific types of bullets, like tracker bullets and gas bullets and explosive bullets that you can choose as well. So they choose to, it's obvious the studio is a bit like, all right, okay, it's difficult to have a third-person shooter work really well on the PSP. They fill the game with these slower moments where you're going, right, I need to take this bomb out over here, I need to take this mine out over here, I need to take this enemy out in this fashion. So they steer away mostly from that frenetic action you probably got from Syphon Filter on the PlayStation 1. You still get that, but the performance sags there comparative to actually you get really good performance when you're thinking about, right, I've got to shoot my sort of zip wire across these flaming gas sort of things that are going on, and and then I've got to drop down this enemy, then use my infrared camera to look up and see where the next bomb is and stuff, and just plotting your way around the level using the gadgets that they've put really handily on that directional pad on the front of the PSP. Brilliant, really, really good. So whilst it's not the perfect Syphon Filter game, I think they've done a good job of getting a third-person shooter onto the PSP and making it work as best they possibly can.
It sounds like how they approached it for Killzone Mercenary as a first-person shooter on Vita, like just slow it down and do it a bit more deliberately, and good, it makes sense. And
the same thing that has always been with the Syphon Filter series all the way through. Really great voiceover, acting, good cutscenes, good amount of really nice sound effects and music and things, really good at setting the tone and the atmosphere. That's not changed in this as well. It's a real mature PSP experience. So I'm really sort of impressed by the fact that they've managed to do such a good job of bringing across a Syphon Filter experience from the PlayStation 1 that I enjoyed and putting it onto the PSP. And with a few snags here and there that the run and gun, I mean, for example, Gabe's roll is gone. Like his lovely combat roll, his lovely hips is gone. Like, as in, his hips are probably gone now. He's a bit older. Like, as in, he's back in the field. He's knackered. But that you can tell they just had to change the way the game works. But they've found something and they've done a good job of that. So I mean, is it the best third-person shooter on the PSP? Certainly one of the best ones that I've come across since being in the podcast and what I've played previously as well. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10, which for a PSP game, I would say the best PSP games that I've played. I've not found a 10 out of 10 PSP game yet, but I've found a couple of 9s, and a couple of 8s, really. Most games kind of cap out sort of 7 or 6 out of 10 for me in my scale that I make up in my head.
Sure.
But this is up there. It really is up there as an experience, and I enjoyed 75 to 80% of the time that I spent with this game, apart from a few fiddly controls when you're trying to do that run and gun situation. And for an espionage game, it doesn't take itself too seriously. I remember there's a point in time where you do the training part of it, and it's like the knife training, and the guys that you're training with are like, "Oh, not the knife training again. That really hurts," and stuff. And it just I've got really good fond memories of playing this game over the last few weeks. That is I don't. Whereas that can't be said for every game I play on the PSP, especially shooters where I kind of come away a bit frustrated.
Yeah.
The small frustrations I had with this were mostly sort of in the background comparatively. So the last point that I wanted to come back to, and I said this about Syphon Filter then, was that I kind of stopped myself at the 9 out of 10 thing, and I was thinking, no one ever speaks about Syphon Filter being on their greatest games of all time list. Now, I'm not saying it has to be, but I am kind of shocked that it's not. It never really floats around there, as I kind of stated at the start. It sits on its own a bit. That I don't think anything else does what Syphon Filter does. And 1, 2, and 3 were such high quality PlayStation 1 games, and Ben Studios pumped out I think 7 Syphon Filter games over an 8-year period as a franchise. I do regularly see it as maybe like, oh, it's a top 10 PS1 sort of franchise and stuff and things like that, but I never see. I think from what I remember playing, I didn't play 2 this time, but I remember Syphon Filter 2 probably being like the quintessential experience of Syphon Filter. I never really see it as a, of your top 25 PlayStation 1 games, it might creep in sort of maybe top sort of like 20 to 25 range or something like that.
Right.
And I just think it's one of the... It would probably break my top 100 of best games ever played, I think. And I'm just shocked that I don't see it in there as much. And I wonder if it is like, if it had better cinematic feel to it, it would be scratching around the same sort of Metal Gear Solid thing.
Yeah, I wonder if perhaps it in some people's eyes, maybe it got it was the kind of thing that started to get surpassed when you start to get your 3D Grand Theft Autos and things like that, and sort of third-person shooting becomes more of a thing that you either go down the cover-based Gears of War route or you go down the open world, like GTA or Ghost Recon Wildlands kinds of neck of the woods. I don't know, but I mean, so would you say it's a bit of a is it a hidden gem, or is it too well known to count as a hidden gem?
I think it is, though. I think there's a lot of people out there that really like Syphon Filter.
Yeah,
I do, but I'm I'm not saying that me on this lowly podcast is going to convince them to go, oh, maybe it is one of the best games I've ever played. But do just sit back and have a little think about, like, have you played that type of game anywhere else better since 1999? And I can't think of many experiences where I have. So, all the way back when I was playing it on that demo disc and recording on a tape to say, oh, I've shot some baddies, like, as in, those memories have stuck hard, but it wasn't just how good those memories are, it's still good today.
Nice.
So,
nice.
So that's it from us this week. And go and check out your third-person shooters. These are, pretty well reviewed, all these 3, I'd say, for, the handheld PSP and PS Vita. So, and we will speak to you next time.
Cheers.